In January of this year, a Collier County commissioner named Bill McDaniel stood up in a public meeting in Naples, Florida, and told the room he had lost a friend on a street called Lilac because nobody could get an ambulance down it. 34 roads in the county were impassable. The county declared an emergency. 33,000 people live out on that grid east of Naples, on lots a company sold sight unseen in 1960 for $30 down and $30 a month. It was swamp when they sold it. It is swamp again now. No dam was ever closed here. No valley was ever flooded, and no reservoir was ever filled. Somebody dug this ground dry on purpose, sold it as Florida, and the water has been coming back for it ever since. The place is Golden Gate Estates, and when Collier County approved the plat in 1960, people called it the largest subdivision in the world. How that land got sold is the first half of this. What nobody ever undid is the second, and the second half is where the people are. The southern half of that grid is a checkerboard now. Pale roads ruled across raw swamp, block after block after block, running out to the horizon. Black water stands over whole sections of it. Cypress and sawgrass have grown back up inside the empty lots. Every street is still down there, and every intersection, and not one house stands in any of them. The company that drew that grid was the Gulf American Land Corporation, run by two brothers out of Baltimore, Leonard and Jack Rosen. They had already built Cape Coral, and Cape Coral had worked. Prospects flew down free on the company airline and stayed at a resort the company put up on a canal at the southern edge of the property. Then a salesman took them up in a small plane and flew them low over the land so they could see what they were buying. That flight is where the fraud actually happened, and almost none of it required a false statement about the land. Naples gets close to 80% of its rain between May and October. In the dry season, the interior of Collier County is flat and firm and pale, and in February that ground looks like something you could pour a slab on tomorrow. By August, the same ground lies under a sheet of standing water, because that is what a Southwest Florida Strand actually is for half the year. They only ever showed it in the dry season. Florida sold a great deal of ground it had no business selling, and I am working my way through it. Subscribe and you will get the next one. 18,000 lots went that way by 1967, most of them to buyers up north who never came to look from the ground. Some of them bought land that was underwater for months at a time. One couple from Detroit later testified that a salesman told them their lot sat 2.5 city blocks from the Gulf of Mexico. It was 9 miles. There was no water out there, no power, no schools, no shops, and no plan to ever build any. Florida had been warned about this company for years, and the state's answer tells you how Florida worked at the time. When the complaints started coming in during the early 1960s, Governor Hayden Burns appointed Leonard Rosen to the state board that oversaw installment land sales. Then the canals went in between 1968 and 1971, and that is what turned a bad land deal into a wound. 4 of them, dead straight, running north to south: Prairie, Merritt, Flocka Union, Miller. 70 miles of channel cut 10 feet deep, the widest of them better than 200 feet across, with the dirt piled up into banks alongside. They worked far better than anyone intended. Water that had taken months to move across that country began leaving it 16 times faster than nature had ever moved it. The water table dropped close to 2 feet, and cypress forest that had covered around 40,000 acres fell to a little over 10. Down at the coast, the estuary had always lived on that water, arriving slowly all year long. Instead, it came down the Flocka Union Canal in a rush at the wrong time of year, every year, and the oyster bars and the mangrove creeks got fresh water when what they needed was salt. Michael Duaver, an ecologist who spent his career out in that country, put it in one line: the canals did their job too well. They did not just drain the home sites, they sucked the life out of the region. The company was gone by 1969, and the grid was not. It stayed exactly where the salesman drew it, 85 square miles of empty street lying out in the water. And a grid like that keeps things. In April of 2004, a Collier County deputy walked out into an open field off Richards Road looking for a phone signal and found a woman lying in a shallow grave, wrapped in a green shower curtain. She was still in a gray sweatsuit. There were sneakers with her, size 7.5. Some of her bones were not there at all. Nobody has ever been able to say how she died. All the record will say is that the way she was buried means somebody put her there. That was 22 years ago. She still has no name, and nobody has ever come for her. She is not the only person that ground has held onto, and the second one is only 2 years old. In August of 2024, a 64-year-old man named Eduardo Ramirez went missing from Golden Gate Estates. His vehicle turned up in a remote spot off Beck Boulevard. The sheriff's office searched with fire crews, forestry, wildlife officers, aircraft, mounted patrol, dog teams, and swamp buggies, because swamp buggies are what that country actually requires. They found him 10 days later, deep inside the Strand. His death did not appear suspicious. He had walked into it, and it took 10 days to get him back out. The state has been trying to take that grid back off the map since the 1980s, and the way they are doing it is one of the strangest jobs of engineering in the country. Of 279 miles of road out there, all but 19 have been pulled up, scraped down to natural grade, and left to grow over. 48 miles of canal have been plugged with earthen dams built out of the same dirt that came out of them when they were dug. Pump stations stand alone out in open swamp with no town anywhere around them. It is called the Picayune Strand Restoration. It was authorized at $349 million, split between Washington and the state of Florida, and the ribbon was cut this past January. 60 years on, that ground looks in every season exactly like what it always was in August. They only ever showed it in the dry season. Florida did move on the company, late. In November of 1967, Gulf American pleaded guilty to 5 counts of fraud and misleading practices, and the state fined it $5,000. 2 years later, the Rosen brothers sold the whole operation for more than $200 million and walked away from it. And by 1974, the county had worked out that the ground could never hold the number of lots already sold on it, so it rezoned and stranded thousands of buyers who were still making payments. All of that is the southern half. There is a northern half, and nobody ever undid it. North of Interstate 75, the exact same grid, drawn by the exact same company in 1960, is a real neighborhood. 33,000 people live in it. 57% of the lots have a house on them, and 4 in 10 are still empty. Their streets flood almost daily in the rainy season. One woman described taking 11 minutes to drive 3/4 of a mile down her own road. And here is the part that has never been fixed. Washington and the state of Florida authorized $349 million to pull the roads out of the half of that grid where nobody lives. The half with 33,000 people on it got a zoning change in 1974, and since then it has got nothing. Those streets are still the ones the salesman drew, laid over ground that goes under every August, and the men who drew them had never seen it in August either. More of this state sits platted over standing water than anybody ever advertised. Subscribe and stay close. So here is what that ground cost. A company bought swamp for $100 an acre and sold it for $900 to people who saw it once from an airplane in February. When the state finally caught up with them, they paid a $5,000 fine and left with $200 million. Washington and Florida have since authorized $349 million to pull the empty half of that grid back out of the ground, road by road, dam by dam, letting the water in on purpose. Nobody has spent anything to undo the other half. 33,000 people are still out there, still waiting on a road that will hold an ambulance in August. They only ever showed it in the dry season.